All right, so good evening to all our participants and welcome to AeHIN Hour's openIMIS webinar series. So before we begin, please note that participants' microphones are muted throughout the meeting. For comments, please use the chat box, and for questions, please use the questions box. Our speakers for tonight are from the openIMIS Developers Committee. We have Mr. Saurav Bhattarai, advisor at the GIZ Sector Initiative Social Protection, and is currently supporting the implementation of openIMIS to manage the National Social Health Insurance of Nepal. We also have Mr. Kamil Made, who's a software developer with 6 years experience as team lead and a member of the development team in FHIR openMRS and FHIR openIMIS modules. We also have Mr. Harsh Atal, who's a software developer with 6 years of experience working on technical aspects of open implementations of the HIS2. So for our first presentation, may we call on Mr. Saurav Bhattarai?
Okay, I think everyone can see my screen. Thank you very much. Thank you to AeHIN, who also is the openIMIS regional a regional hub for implementation and capacity building in Asia. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this AeHIN Hour series on openIMIS. Today we're going to focus on how openIMIS has been using FHIR in the various interoperability work that we've been doing. So the way today's hour is structured is that I'll give you a brief introduction of openIMIS and our need to be on FHIR, and I'll hand over to our developers committee experts, Kamil and Harsh, to go into the detail of the FHIR API implementation in openIMIS. So as a brief background, what is openIMIS? openIMIS is an open source software for managing health financing processes. It helps to digitize the link between patients, providers, and payers for healthcare. So be it a voucher scheme or another health financing scheme similar to insurance or beyond, openIMIS can be used to manage the various processes. It is supported by a community of developers, users, and implementers in various parts of the world. We have a very wide range of developers, as you will see in this presentation as well, user committees as well as implementers committee. And what we want to do is we want to increase, our mission is to increase and improve universal health coverage as well as universal social protection. As the name suggests, we are an open source community of practice. This is the copyright information. The copyright is held by SDC, but it's licensed with the AGPL version 3 license as published by the Free Software Foundation. It's free to use, modify, and redistribute, but also only freely. So let me just go into a brief introduction of the workflows that openIMIS facilitates. The major 4 workflows are listed here. So openIMIS facilitates the process of beneficiary management or enrollment, as well. So this means enrolling a household or an individual into a health financing scheme. Also manages collection of information at the health service delivery point. So this would be patient visit and verification, collecting information about patient treatment, and then ultimately using all this information to actually create a claim. So this claim is managed by openIMIS, and it is submitted digitally to the scheme operators where it can be reviewed, and then the payment for the health services provided can be reimbursed to the health facilities. And very importantly, openIMIS also offers a very robust monitoring and reporting system where scheme operators, as well as health facilities and even beneficiaries, can look at the various the data that has been collected in various ways to ultimately improve the quality of care that's being provided. Where openIMIS is used currently, as you can see on the map, these are our implementations. So it started out in Tanzania. We still have the implementation going on in Tanzania, Cameroon with a mutual scheme, in DRC and Chad. There are small-scale implementations currently underway in pilots or very small scale. And in Nepal, it is also being used to manage the national social health insurance. So we do have running implementations where decisions on payments to providers are being made using openIMIS. Just a very quick introduction on FHIR. And if you have more questions, please address our colleagues experts that will follow me, as they are the experts on FHIR. But just to set the background, FHIR, or the Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resource Specification, is a standard for exchanging healthcare information electronically, so between systems or even within a system. It's a global standard, so that multiple information systems can understand the information on healthcare that's being exchanged. The basic building block in the FHIR is what's called a resource, and all exchangeable content within FHIR is defined as a resource. So, and then the resource is a common way to define and represent entities. There's a common set of metadata as well as a human readable part. Just to show you an example, what I have on the screen is pulled from the FHIR website, and this is the very first part of the patient resource, and you can see how a patient is defined in FHIR. So there's an identifier, is the patient active or not, name, and this can be optional as well, telecom, gender, date of birth. And if you go to the FHIR website, you can see the entire list and the details of other resources as well. But this is just to give you an idea of what FHIR is and how the standard is there to represent healthcare entities. Now I'll go into the need for FHIR within openIMIS. What actually motivated us to go down this route. And it begins from a short history on openIMIS. So openIMIS started out as being only IMIS, so it wasn't open source in 2012. It was developed to manage the community health funds in Tanzania by the Swiss Tropical Public Health Institute, Exact Software, and Microinsurance Academy. But it was built in a way that it could be customized for other contexts, and could be scaled in other contexts as well. So with that, but there was no open source license, and every time a new implementation had to be done, permission was needed from the copyright holder, STC. Slowly, the concept of using it in other places came to fruition. So in 2003, customization for Cameroon for a small mutual scheme started. Same thing in Nepal in 2014 for the national health insurance. And then by 2016, we already had these 3 implementations of the same software, where then it was decided that we would, STC, the Swiss Development Cooperation and the German Development Cooperation decided that it makes a lot of sense to actually release IMIS as an open source software and create a community of practice around it. And in 2016, the openIMIS initiative was born. And since then, we've been working with openIMIS, merged all the various functionalities of the 3 versions in Tanzania, Cameroon, Nepal together, and have been moving towards making the software more easily accessible. And one of the main things was to make it modular, so that bits and pieces of it could be used in various combinations to fulfill even more business processes in health financing schemes. And we are still continuing on in this process. So in this, in our goal to become more modular, we had to make some decisions. So when we had IMIS, as you can see on the screen, it was a very monolithic structure with just distinctions between the web interface. All the business logic was in one monolithic layer, and then we had a data access layer and a separate database as well. What we wanted to achieve was to get rid of this monolithic structure and get to a more modular one where different functionalities could be combined in ways. So if you look at the new diagram on the right where we wanted the modular structure, you can see that the business logic particularly has been broken down. So the various business processes within openIMIS, as in the enrollment, the claim, have been broken down together with their data access layers as well, and also introduces the possibilities of creating new modules. So as you can see, we can create module X or module Y, or even beyond, we even looked at a module being completely separate, as in just being interoperable with the openIMIS core, and this could be an example of interoperating with another digital health system altogether. And in this process of modularization, we started out with the claim module, if you want to learn more about it, please visit our wiki, where we have documented our modular, how we went about the modularization and the work that has been done on the claim module. But what this meant was, so for this modularization as well, we needed a lot of communication between these modules to perform the entire business logic together. And that meant that we would need some kind of a standard. Same thing with workflows. In our 4 major workflows, we noticed that health service was being managed by other digital health tools as well, particularly openMRS and Bamni. And in a majority of the places that we're implementing, we saw that DHIS2 was managing the monitoring and reporting of countries. So for us, it made natural sense to see to have interoperability between these systems. So openIMIS and Bamni and openIMIS and DHIS2 with using FHIR as an interface as a standard to do this. So this is how we started looking into FHIR to help us achieve interoperability within these systems. Similarly, another case for enrollment, we have seen cases where there are other beneficiary management systems that could be based on FHIR. An example is OpenCRVS. We haven't looked into this interoperability yet, but this could be another possibility where we can use FHIR to really exchange health data between these various systems. But in this presentation, experts Kamil and Harsh will be focusing on these 2 use cases that you have on the screen. So the integration between the FHIR resource for the integration with openMRS Bamni, and then the work that we have done in terms of extending some of the existing FHIR resource for interoperability with DHIS2. Just these are links to the details of the mapping work that we have done. I'm sure this presentation will be shared after the webinar, so you can use this page to go to the various resources that we have available. So with that, I would like to hand over to Kamil now, but also urge you to subscribe to the openIMIS newsletter. Please visit our website. And if you're interested in being an implementer, please join the Implementers Committee. And if you're a developer, join the openIMIS Developers Committee through these various links. Thank you very much. And Kamil, over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Please give me 1 second. I will share my screen. I hope you can see my screen right now. So yes, hello everyone. Sarah focus more on a business point of view regarding IMIS and FHIR. I will more focus on technical point of view. I will start with my experience and our experience as self-develop, because I'm part of the self-develop company. So we have experience in openMRS Sync module, which uses FHIR underneath. It's synchronization between different openIMIS instances. We developed new openIMIS FHIR module, as Soro said. Currently, the new version of openIMIS is modular. So the FHIR module is a separate module which converts the current schema to the FHIR model and expose it via API. So this is the module which can be used to communicate with different systems. I will show you in next screen how it works underneath. openIMIS FHIR module, also we had some experience with it. We made some input to converting and exposing openIMIS API. We use it a Sync 2.0 module and also in openIMIS insurance claims module, which connects with openIMIS. And openIMIS insurance claim module, as I said, it was one of our tasks to verify if openIMIS FHIR module works as expected and connect it with the openIMIS insurance claim module via FHIR. Okay, so starting with the openIMIS, as you can see, our task was to connect the business logic of openIMIS to FHIR as a separate module. In the future, we also think about FHIR data store. So I will talk briefly about it later, about the performance issue, which we see. However, as I said, currently we use still the openIMIS legacy database type. However, maybe in the future we also move to the FHIR data store. So as you can see, IMIS business logic connects to data store in the openIMIS FHIR module, and this FHIR module exposes FHIR API to different systems. For example, openIMIS, BACMI, or DHS2. Those three systems currently has some modules which connect to IMIS via FHIR. Our job was also to verify and connect openIMIS. So I will also talk about it briefly. Okay, and in openIMIS, we also made some synchronization via FHIR using Sync 2.0 module, openIMIS instance with the other openIMIS instance. Okay, so here, quite important slide. I want to focus on it because I had some thoughts. I had some experience with the FHIR, so maybe it will help others. Or if you have any questions later after the presentation, you can always ask me privately or using some Google group, community openIMIS Google group. Okay, so from a technical point of view, when we started FHIR implementation, because it was our job, I think the most challenging and really difficult task for us was to have some domain knowledge, because to be honest with you, from the technical perspective, it wasn't so difficult. It was like writing some code, mapping, exposing. FHIR is quite similar to REST API in the structure, so it wasn't something new for us. However, it was really difficult with the mapping, domain mapping, because IMIS is a system with some implementation in different countries. So it's maybe not the biggest system, however, it's also not the smallest. So it was really difficult to understand how openIMIS domains work, how we can map it to the FHIR model, how we can map, even if we found connected resource, we need to also find a way how to map one of the field to another. So I think it's really important to start with it. I will show you right now how we started. So before we writing any code, before writing some implementation, we started with documentation and communication with the openIMIS community. It's really important, I think, to communicate well and to have some internal discussion, and not not to start implement it too fast, in my opinion. I will show you only one of the resources how we done it. So we try to map every field, like openIMIS field to FHIR field, one by one, making some notes, making some suggestions how it should work, etc., etc. Also, we gave some example to openIMIS community how you can connect later with it, what's the URL for it, what's the available HTTP operation, etc., etc. So also we haven't exposed every domain in openIMIS to FHIR because it wasn't needed. However, it was really important to understand and to communicate with openIMIS which resources are really important. And it was also the challenge for us in openIMIS. It's also quite important to understand how to do it field by field. There are some possibilities to use extensions. I will also talk about it in the next slide. So if you have some difficulties, like you cannot find a way to map one field from the system to another, to FHIR field, FHIR community enables you to use some FHIR extensions. However, we had some difficulties. I will talk about it later. Okay, so as I said, communication with the community is very important, and we started adding resources one by one, and also it is nice to have feedback as fast as possible, because even if you made some progress and exposed some API, it's only during real use cases, real situation, when possible have try to connect back me with openIMIS. Some problems, of course, appeared when DHIS2 tried to connect with openIMIS. Also it was similar situation. I think it's quite normal in every product life cycle. So we try to adding one by one and have some acceptance tests after added resource, and new requirements also appeared during our progress, during our implementation. So I think it was good experience for us. I also, one of the suggestions I made, I think last year during one of the webinar, it would be great if, for example, in FHIR community, it can be added some FHIR module starter pack, something like that. So it would be great to create some implementation process. So when I go to the FHIR website and I want to implement FHIR in my system, in my application, probably I would expect some documentation step by step, maybe also the technical one with the examples from the different languages, etc. So it will be nice to have something like this. And I also link here FHIR documentation, so it's this. Okay, challenges. So what was not easy for us, and where we had some problems. So as I said at the beginning, lack of project model knowledge. We during our job also we use a lot help from the openIMIS legacy developers who had some model knowledge and knows how to map it and what they need from the FHIR API. So it was really useful for us and it was easier. Choosing FHIR version. Yeah, so I think, I'm not sure right now, however, I think that FHIR currently is on version 5 or want to release version 5. However, last year when we made this decision, we had some difficulties which version to choose. in final version we chose version 3. However, now there are some requirements, some needs to also support the version 4. So I think it's good to spend some time to think about it, what you need from your application, and for what kind of different system you want to connect. CDA to FHIR converters, it was a challenge, I think, in openIMIS, because we had some meetings with the openIMIS community and we want to use converters. However, it was really difficult for us, and documentation on FHIR website also from our perspective not readable enough. FHIR extensions, we do not use it much. We had some problem with the FHIR compatibility. Also, it was too much time to spend on it from our perspective, of course, because maybe someone on audience have different experience, and in your project, in your system, you use it and you didn't have much problem. So it would be nice also to maybe talk about it later after Harsh's presentation. FHIR module performance. So I think also one issue which needs to be think before implementation, and we haven't implemented and used it yet in openIMIS or openIMIS. However, it's probably be nice to also use FHIR database, yes, because when you have conversion every time, like for example, the request is sent to openIMIS and you want to convert openIMIS claim to FHIR claim, every time there's conversion, of course, you can use some cache, etc. However, I think in the future, if you think, or even if you start with new application, you write something new, it will be good approach to choose FHIR database, also because of the performance issue. And last point, from my experience and my team, we implemented FHIR in Python language for openIMIS and in Java language for openIMIS. Generally, it was easier for us to write FHIR module in Java because of external libraries availability. As I said, maybe during last month it changed. However, to be honest with you, I couldn't find any new libraries. I remember that in Java, the libraries for converting and for exposing FHIR server was easier to find and easier to use. I think in Python the libraries weren't so comprehensive for now. So I think that's all from my side. I hope you have some questions, maybe more technical, maybe also I can ask your questions later. I can also show you some demo after the presentation if you want. So thanks everyone. So I think now it's Harsh, your turn.
Thank you, Kamil. Hope everybody is able to see my screen and I'm audible. So it was a very nice introduction done by Saurabh and Kamil, and I will go through how we have used FHIR in terms of integration between openIMIS and DHIS2. So first, I'll just go briefly through what we are working on. I'm from HISP India, and we are part of the team that is working on the integration between openIMIS and DHIS2, and we're using FHIR. The way that we have set that up is that we are taking individual records from each of the domains, for example, insurance, claims, insurance policy, and from each of these individual records, we are calculating some indicators that can be shown as an analysis output. So from what the work that we have sought is in three components. I mean, it is the transfer, the writing of the extensions, which Kamil briefly touched upon. Although Solver Develop has not used the extension, but we have made use of it, and I will go later on why we have used that. Sorry, and why we are doing this is because we have a certain set of outputs that we want to be able to show in the HIS2. So our final aim is the HIS2 reporting solution for openIMIS, so that the dashboards and the analysis and the analytics features of the HIS2 can be used by openIMIS. So I'll quickly go through the process that we have followed in order to achieve this. So we are about more than a year into this process, and how we have approached this is that we have started from the outputs and from that going backwards. So we defined the output indicators, the key performance indicators that we had collectively for each of the openIMIS instances. And once we built that list, we have broken them down into individual formulas, individual atomic elements. I mean, for example, there is an indicator and it has a numerator and denominator. So we broke it down into each part, and then we mapped for each of these atomic elements as to what is the FHIR counterpart. For example, in openIMIS there is insuring, and that we have mapped to patient, and which is again mapped to another metadata point in DHIS2. So like once this when we followed this process, we ended up with having some of the representations getting mapped correctly, like getting mapped into FHIR, and some of it was left out. So like because the choice has to be made between how do we interpret basically data model in terms of three systems. One is the openIMIS, the another becomes this FHIR standard, then the HIS2. So getting to a tandem between these three systems is something that we found non-trivial to do, and took a bit of effort. So once we have sort of gone through this process, and once we are at the level when we have a certain set of FHIR elements and then something that is left out, there are three options open to us to do. I mean, either we have to reinterpret our data in terms of another set of FHIR representation, or we have to add into FHIR, because FHIR, since it's a global standard, it has the ability, you can propose that we need this new field in this element, and then the community, it goes through a certain community guideline, and then the whole process. But we can also but that takes a lot of time, and also there's no guarantee that those will be accepted or not. So as an workaround, as a sort of a legal workaround is to use what we found is to use extensions, which is also in terms of which is also called as kind of a profiling of a certain FHIR schema. So I'll just go through maybe the broad mappings that we have done. So for all the indicators that we figured out that we will make into DHIS2, those indicators fell into these four broad domains. So those are insuring policy, claim, and health facility. And then we sort of mapped it into these three buckets. So the insuring from openIMIS becomes a patient in FHIR. which is another representation in DHIS2, and then the same for claim. It becomes a FHIR claim object, and then it goes to another representation in DHIS2. So this was the broad mapping that we did, and I mean, I'll come to why we use extensions. But before this presentation, Kamil suggested that I mean, they have not used extensions because it is a kind of an extra thing that you add to a FHIR resource. But if you follow the if you go as per the guideline, it is a legal use case. I mean, you can have extensions, and it is, although it is optional, but it is available to be used if you need it. And the way to do that is we found it very it's not that difficult. I mean, it's like you have a mandatory definition in terms of the resource, like for a patient, it will have name, gender, date of birth, and then there can be n number of extensions which can have a URL which points to a description of the extension and the value. Now, taking a concrete example from our project, for the model injury, which we mapped as a patient in FHIR, we needed one more property for each of the patient, which was called isHead. So basically, this property tells if the insurer is the head of the family or not. So since we are taking individual records into the DHIS2, so we need to know for each of the record if the individual is the head of the family or not. So the way we structured the extension for that, I mean, we have these two properties. The link takes you to a description page where you can where you have the definition of the extension and then the value. Same way we have for another example for profession. Now the first one was like for each of the insuree. Now this one has also for each of the insuree, but now instead of isHead, it has like what profession the insuree belongs to, and this we kept as a free text. So before it was yes and no kind of element. Now it's a text kind of element. So it's so extensions provide us a kind of a flexible way to map those variables that we might need, and for various reasons. So I will also come to why we had to use it. But before that, I will take you through this kind of a fancy diagram. But this kind of represents the whole workflow of how we had to how we saw this mapping going on, because we have these three systems, and since we have worked both on the openIMIS side of FHIR and the DHIS2 side of FHIR, so we kind of know the number of mappings that have to be done, because to at the domain side, for example, at the openIMIS side, at the database level, you have to map in a certain way so that the relevant data is available for the as a FHIR representation. And then in order to consume that data also, you have to model it in a specific way in your system. So it's a three-way mapping internally. I mean, when you sort of the coding and all is fine, but the actual decision to map and what to map, that is a bit complex. So the needs that the extension fulfilled for us, since we are taking this name-based data, since we are taking individual records, so we need so there are some, and so which means we have to do all the analytics within DHIS2. So we're taking the data from IMIS and we put the data in DHIS, and then we do the analysis there. So that means there are certain way we have to configure our system so that all the indicators can be calculated the dashboards can be populated. And there's a certain flexibility in doing this this configuration, because DHIS2 has a flexible sort of way of configuring it, especially tracker, which is the individual individual record module of DHIS2. So all these individual records can be modeled in a way which sort of allow us to make analysis easy. So we not only have to we not only have to figure out accurately as to what FHIR extensions to map in DHIS2, but we also have to do it so that the analysis in DHIS becomes easy for us to do. So there are certain things for that for that we found that use of extensions is we found very useful for that. And then secondly, for the mandatory field or the data synchronization logistic. Now, this is something that we found grossly missing in FHIR, because the way we have approached this integration is that we take the data from openIMIS into DHIS2 in a periodic way, so that we take last month's data or last 6 months data for insuree claim, insuree policy. So we need some fields through which we can determine if the data has changed or not, and those fields are not in business logic terms meaningful for the representation, but for the technical, for the transfer of data point of view, which that information is useful. So those things we found extensions very helpful, because then we can add these fields, and these are not fields that a business logic person would need to understand in indicators, but these are fields which a technical person would need to manage the integration. And in similar manner, there are some things like which need to be associated. There are certain things that one system imposes upon another. So DHIS2 has a certain way of requiring FHIR to present data. For example, not every field has date of creation of a record, but to be able for us to import the data, we would need that, and we cannot. I mean that has to come from the other system. So for that use also we have found extensions to be useful. I think these are the basic two things for which we find how FHIR extensions can be useful for us. And it would be very great to know what I mean, how you have managed, especially the logistics side of this of using FHIR, and if you have any experience with that. So I will hand over now to the presenter. Thank you, and if you have any questions, just you can ask now.
Thank you, Sir Saurabh, Sir Camille, and Sir Harsh. So I will be reading the questions from our participants, since not everyone can see them. So the first question is, are the openIMIS and openMRS instances released as separate containers, or are they in one?
Okay, so I will answer this question. They are separate containers. In openMRS, insurance claims module is a module, and openMRS is also modularity application, and the instances are separate. So I think this is the answer.
All right, thank you, Sir Harsh. This next question is from Dr. Vikas, and this is for Sir Saurabh. At the health facility level, how does the openIMIS data interact with an EMR system that capture disease and treatment services?
All right, thank you for the question. So basically, in a scenario where you have a health facility that has an EMR fully implemented, the EMR would be sending data, particularly with all the, because an EMR should have more data than it needs to send to openIMIS. So with all the disease and treatment details in an EMR, a claim can be generated, and based on the FHIR resources, if the claim can be generated according to the claim resource in FHIR, it can be sent to openIMIS. So that's basically the interaction. The EMR would send data to openIMIS as a claim, and then based on the depending on the EMR, if it's something like BAMNI, which also deals with potentially financial information with an ERP, openIMIS can send back details on the review status of the claims.
Right, thank you, Sir. Our next question is, how important is defining a use case in an interoperability project like this?
I can start, and then maybe my colleagues can help finish it. But I think it's very important to define a use case, and the reason we were able to get so far forward with the mapping was because we had a very concrete use case. We were we need interoperability for concrete reasons. We know what data points to map. So I think defining such a use case has helped us really achieve it, rather than thinking about what interoperability things might be required later.
Yeah, I agree. I can also add, maybe from technical point of view, however, I think there are many ways to communicate between applications, for example, REST API. However, the advantage of FHIR, and I see from my experience from last year that FHIR is really hot topic in mobile health. The advantage is the model is the same, so you can expect the same model, for example, for patient. And the problem is that in almost every application, the patient model looks a bit differently. Different fields, for example, gender or some name can be differently stored in any database. And FHIR gives us the way that we are sure that this concrete resource, as I gave example as a patient, is stored the same with the same fields. So I think it's my answer.
Just to add to this, for defining a use case, I mean, this is indispensable for example, for what we are doing with openIMIS and DHIS2. We have to first figure out what we want to achieve. As a concrete example, I mean, we have a list of around 60 indicators that we want to map in DHIS2, and this is the starting point from which we work backwards. So first we define the use case, the indicators that we need to be able to show, and then go backwards from that. So I mean, to make a completely I mean, to a generic in terms of requirement, in terms of what can be achieved through an integration like this, to constrain it in a certain limit is the first step, I would say.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, did you consider other ways to interoperate aside from FHIR?
Kamil, I think you had partially answered this with looking into other REST API models as well, right?
Yes, as I said, I do not have much knowledge from the business point of view for the openIMIS. However, as far as I know, yes, it was considered. However, the FHIR was chosen because of the popularity of its. You can sort of correct me if I'm wrong. However, I think it's the answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, thank you. We have another question, and this is from Dr. Jens Geisler. So it's a question on mapping. If openIMIS had been developed based on the FHIR standard in the first place, this mapping would not have been necessary. Is that correct?
Thanks, Dr. Jens. And then because I can see the questions, there's another question in the list that relates to it, so I'll try to answer it together.
Yes.
So basically, yes, if we had based it on the FHIR standard in the first place, this mapping would not have been necessary. But when this was started in 2012, we didn't know of the standards to base everything on, and FHIR wasn't around, I believe. There's another question from Brent McGaw here in terms of what database we use. So right now, as I explained, the monolithic structure of openIMIS is based a lot on Microsoft products, including Microsoft SQL database. And we are in the modular transformation. We are also doing a technology transformation where we are going to more open source products, which includes the database, right? And right now, so we don't want to even get to a point where we force our users to use a particular database engine, but we aim to be database agnostic as much as possible and only keep data there. But that also brings us to a point where Dr. Jens has a question: is there a plan to use FHIR as the basis of new development? So we've been looking at various options. There is a database option in terms of using Firebase to do all the mappings to FHIR, but that makes us tied to PostgreSQL, and because of this, we'll start getting tied to PostgreSQL rather because of the dependency on Firebase. But if later we do have other database options where we can use Firebase and not be stuck to PostgreSQL, we will aim at using other databases as well. So the current data model is in MS SQL. We are migrating it right now. We are thinking of migrating to PostgreSQL, but as developments occur, we could just make it database agnostic so that we can cater to more projects where other databases are being used.
Thank you, Sir Sarab. We have another question on DHIS2. So is it released via containers or Dockers separately or with FHIR server plus openIMIS plus openMRS?
Yes, currently it is separately. It is not contained within the same container, but we are working so that it can be added within the within the same containers. But right now, yes, it is a separate installation.
Thank you, Sir Harsh. Our next question is, when it comes to HIS and health system, any plan to scale up and consider some more countries?
Thank you for this. It really depends on the needs of the countries. openIMIS as a tool is open source and available for anyone and everyone to use. But if you do have particular ideas on where an application could be, please reach out to us, and I can get in touch with you as well to explore possibilities. But we do want openIMIS used in more and more countries, and even within countries in more health financing scheme operators. So there is not a particular scale-up plan, but we'll be happy to support countries and scheme operators if they're interested in using openIMIS in their organizations.
Our next question is from Dr. Brent. So how many people currently are involved in supporting and developing openIMIS?
So in the development, we have a few developer teams working on openIMIS on various aspects. So we're looking at about 20 individuals, but various groups. So it's just not one software company that is working on it. As you saw in this presentation as well, we have teams from HISP India, Sol Develo. We have 5 teams in total, with Blue Square being another team. We have Swiss TPH, the original developers of openIMIS also involved. So yeah, all in all, 5 teams, about 20 people working on the development. And we're working very hard to get new developers and new teams in as well. If you visit our wiki, stay tuned to our Twitter and our website. We'll announce opportunities as they come by. So if this is something of interest to you, we would be very happy if you or your team would apply to such opportunities. Thanks.
Thank you, Sir Saurabh. So we have a question for clinical practitioners. There are 2 questions. So first, what do we need to know or ask to ensure our systems are interoperable with another? And the second one is, clinicians do not go to the code level, so how can we constrain our EMR developers to make their software interoperable to each other?
Kamil, maybe you want to take this one. How can we constrain our EMR developers?
I'm thinking, however, to be sure, I do not know exactly how answer to your question. I think one of the option is to use open source community like openIMIS, openMRS. There are some forums, there are some platforms where you can ask for help and maybe some short call presentation, etc. So it's my first suggestion. Next, I also know that there's FHIR community, because I remember from last year that someone told me that. So it's probably also a good idea to talk with them. And of course, FHIR documentation. The website is quite good, tutorials, technical documentation, etc. So I think those are the options I would suggest.
And just to add, I think if clinicians can be really, if they have a say in decision making of selecting EMRs, it would be good if they really push on the use of standards. So deployment of, let's say, FHIR compatible EMRs only, and not EMRs that are not compatible to not only FHIR but globally accepted standards.
Yes, thank you. I think that is our last question. We also reached the time. So thank you to all our participants for actively participating in this webinar, and especially to our speakers for sharing their time and expertise to the AeHIN community. So any last words from our speakers?
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have a short presentation for you, and see you later, probably in some groups and community. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Good day. Bye-bye.